Hi, it's Andy, and today I am going to be filming my 15 favourite books, and please excuse all of this. I'm not feeling great. I've been off work now for 2 weeks, signed off by the doctor because I am not feeling well. I'm very not well, and they are doing tests to try and figure out what's happening, but I look like crap, I feel like crap. I'm all good with that. I've got my handy Hamish down beside me. I showed him my vlog, which I don't know if this is going up before or after that. This is probably going up first, but I showed him a vlog that he likes to sit underneath the tripod, so I refer to him as my little cameraman. But yeah, he's going to be keeping me company through the video. So I'm basically just going to go through the 15 favourite books that I have on my shelf. I picked the number 15 purely because I picked the books off my shelf, counted them, and there was 15. Happy accident that it's a multiple of 5 because I love it when things like that come together. So without further ado, I am going to get right into it. This is kind of going in no particular order. I just kind of pulled from this side and then went across this way. But some of them are older favourites and some of them are newer favourites, but I'll go through that when I do the video. The first on my favourites is A Quick Bite by Lindsay Sands. This isn't actually my favourite Lindsay Sands book. For this, I pulled this to represent the entire series. I don't know if you can see, but I've got the entire series up on my bookshelves. It's one of my favourite series ever. They're not by any means intellectual books. They are romances, sci-fi, smutty romances. They are about a family of, or it starts out about a family of vampires, but these are not ordinary vampires, they are technological vampires. So the vampirism comes from nanobots which are in their blood, and these were created in Atlantis, so some of these people are centuries if not millennia old. This family, it follows, they vary in age quite a lot, but the nanobots were created in Atlantis, and what they do is they keep the host at their peak. So the point of the nanos was that they were meant to go into the body, cure cancer, heal them, and stop working and just flush out. However, what the scientists didn't take into account was that the human body is always needing regeneration, be it from aging, pollution in the air, pollution from other sources, the water, your food, damage from the sun. So these nanobots never actually stopped working, and so brought their host to their peak and created these vampires. And the reason they became vampires is because the nanos use their blood to fuel themselves, to make repairs, everything they need. It's like their petrol, is the host's blood. So because the human body doesn't make enough blood to sustain these bots, they need to take in blood from other sources. When Atlantis was around, that was fine, they just used blood transfusions. But then when Atlantis fell, they were stuck in a very primitive world. When they crossed the mountains, or the only people that were able to cross the mountains were these vampires. They crossed the mountains and found themselves in this very primitive world. So the nanos forced evolution to give them night vision, fangs, all the things they need to be a top predator to get what they need. I love this because I'm such a science nerd, and nanotechnology like this, or somewhat similar to this, is being developed. Now this is the first book in the series, and this was written in, or published in 2005. So she was way ahead of the trend, and way ahead of the nanobot thing, which makes it so much fun. But these books are about each of the first family members. So this is about Lysiana, who's the daughter of the family. It's about these 5 children finding their life mates. Now, life mates in this world are people that you can live with, be around. They are the love of your life, effectively. Sorry, Hamish is headbutting the tripod. So the nanos actually choose your life mate for you. As part of their evolution, they can also read and control minds, which means anybody around them, especially if they are younger than them or in a weakened state, they can read their mind and control them. Now, you can imagine living with someone who can read your mind or control you would be a horrible thing. So the life mates, one of the signs and one of the benefits of a life mate is that you can't read them, they can't read you, none of you can control each other, which just makes this paradise for you to be together. And the nanos are never wrong. You always have a very happy, idyllic, loving relationship. Some of these life mates have been together for millennia, and this is about each member of the family finding their life mate. Now the books all go in the same sort of pattern, and you know, like I said, it's not like an intellectual thing, but I love it. I love how much you get to know each character, and then in the subsequent books you see different sides of the characters that you know and love, and it branched out from the family to the cousins and then the friends, and it's just, it keeps expanding, and I will never get tired of this. She is an auto-buy author. I immediately pre-order anything that she comes out with in this series, and I will read it immediately when I get it. I will put everything else on hold to read these books. I love them so much. I'm not even going to call them a guilty pleasure because I don't feel guilty for something that I enjoy, but as far as I'm concerned, best vampire series quite probably out there. Although I'm probably going to conflict with myself later because I'm pretty sure I've got more vampire stuff in here. Sorry if you hear a lot of like pad 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 pad. Apparently Hamish has decided that he's just going to walk around and turn in circles because he wants to sit on my knee, and he can't sit on my knee because I'm filming a video and he knows he can't sit on my knee, so he's going to huff and peace. The next book is Revolution by Jennifer Donnelly. This book is one that I picked up because it looked kind of similar to one of the other books that is in this list, and I can't remember how long ago. This is a hardback, so this must be the new, you know, I got this when it came out, and this was, oh, 2010. That's not even that bad. That's not as old as I thought it was. This is about a teenager who goes to stay with her father, and oh, that's why I picked it up. Her name is Andy, spelled A-N-D-I. That is my name, that's why I picked it up. So I'll just read this out to you because it's better than me trying to describe it. Two girls united in a quest to save a young prince, but separated by over 200 years. Andy lives in present-day New York and is dealing with the aftermath of her brother's accidental death. Alexandrine lives in Paris and is desperately trying to save a young boy from the ravages of the French Revolution. Their paths collide as Andy unlocks a route into the past which might just hold the key to reconciling herself to her own history and her future. A romantic, utterly engrossing story of two girls, two boys, and the heart-wrenching thread that binds them together across the centuries. So this basically covers Andy, her younger brother has died and she's not really over it very well. And she ends up going to stay with her father and her father's friends in Paris. And she is supposed to be writing some sort of essay, and I think she decided to do it on music in France because she's a musician. So while she's going around this old house, they're unpacking because I think her dad's an archaeologist and so are the friends, and she comes across this case, this trunk, and she gets pulled into the mystery of what happened in the French Revolution, during the French Revolution, to Prince Louis, so the young son of the king at the time, and the history of what happened to him. Alexandrine is trying to save him. She has been his governess, I think, and is desperate to save this little boy from death because she knows that the revolution will end up killing him. So Andy goes one night into the catacombs of Paris and she gets swept away, accidentally walks through this section of the catacombs and gets lost and ends up outside in Paris during the revolution. So she is in Alexandrine's body basically, and she falls in love with Louis, not in a romantic way, in this is a small boy and he is sweet and he's caring and he's lovely and she wants to help save him. So this goes back and forward with Andy trying to figure out what's happened in the past and going back to Alexandrine in the past trying to save him. And I've done absolutely no justice to this, but it is just incredible. This pains me to think of what happened to the Little Prince. Because historically we know, and it's not a spoiler because it's historical fact, he was left in a tower to die. So during the Revolution they killed all of the nobles, or a lot of the nobles and the king and queen, but nobody could really justify killing a child. I think he's something like 5 years old. You know, he's really, really young. He is a child, he's a small child, and nobody can really justify killing him. So what they do instead is they put him into what is, to the French people, a protective custody. But what actually happens is they put him into this tower, they don't feed him, they don't give him water, and they just wait until he dies. Can you imagine doing that to a small child? And because some of the people that are there do feel pity for him and feel bad for what they're doing, they do feed him and give him water. So over the years that he's there, he slowly starves to death in this locked tower. And it is horrific, and this makes you feel that, and it's beautiful, and I can't even do this justice at all, but please read this book if you get a chance. The next book, and the book I was speaking about that this reminded me of, is The Lost Book of Salem by Catherine Howe. So it's got that same effect, that beigey sort of colour of an old book, and I really love that in a book for some reason. I was really into that at the time. When was this published? This was published 2009, so I probably ended up getting them at the same time on the same day. This book is our main character, Connie Goodwin, who comes from a family of witches. Now, I'm going to read the back just because it is a better representation of this. So it says, "I watched as Giles Corey was pressed to death between the stones. He had lain so for 2 days mute. With each stone they told him he must plead, lest more stones be added. But he only whispered, more weight. Standing in the crowd, I found Goodwife Dane, who, as the last stone lowered, went white, gripped my hand and wept. Salem Town, 16 September 1692. While clearing out her grandmother's cottage for sale, Connie Goodwin finds a parchment inscribed with the name Deliverance Dane, and so she steps into a mystery that dates from 1692 in Salem and the infamous witchcraft trials. Nothing is entirely as it seems, and when Connie unearths the existence of Deliverance's spellbook, the physic book, the situation takes on a menacing edge as interested parties reveal the desperation to find this precious artefact at any cost. What secret does the physic book contain? What magic is scrawled across the parchment pages? Connie must race to answer these questions and reveal the truth about Salem's women before an ancient family curse fulfills its dark and devastating prophecy." So what I love about this, and if you know anything about the books that I love that are historical fiction, Catherine Howe is a historian. Catherine Howe was a PhD student at the time of writing this, or at least the time it was published, and the main character in this, Connie, is also a PhD. I think she is looking after PhD students, so you know, the author knows what she's talking about, and this really shows in the book the research that the character does into what's happening with that sort of detached historian belief. It just works really, really well. I also love that Catherine Howe, if you know anything about the Salem witch trials, if you have seen, read, studied The Crucible by Arthur Miller, you'll recognise the name Catherine Howe, because Catherine Howe is actually, this Catherine Howe is a descendant of one of the women that was tried at the Salem witch trials, and it's just so interesting that she's put all of this personal stuff into this book, and it has made it work so well. It's a mystery, it's magical, it splits between now and then, which I love in a book, as you'll come to realise. This sort of story is what showed my love for historical fiction, and it's a different kind of historical fiction because it is based in, you know, 1692. You normally get World War II historical fiction, so if you want to expand, I would certainly recommend this book. I would also recommend Revolution because it is a time period that, again, I only think I've read that book about it. So yeah, definitely recommend. The next book, if you know these books, it's not a surprise to you based on what I've just shown you, and that is Labyrinth by Kate Moss. Kate Moss is an author, not Kate Moss, the model. She has an E in her name, totally different woman. I recently hauled her new book, City of Tears, as I have recently finished The Burning Chambers, and this is the second book to it, The City of Tears, so I'll let you read it. And I've got a signed edition. This was the book that started that love. Labyrinth is about our characters Alice and Alice. One lives in 2005 and one lives in 1209. I love the whole concept of books splitting between two timelines and those timelines converging. As you will probably guess, Alice is a descendant of Alice. I don't know if I'm saying that right, that's just how I think it's said. I'm really not sure. It's A-L-A-I with the 2 dots, S. Alice. I'm assuming it's a precursor or French version of Alice. This is also set during the time when France was two different places. So you had the Languedoc and what you now see as France. The Languedoc, the people were persecuted and its language almost completely removed, its customs removed, its gods, everything. And this is kind of where this is. So Alice is looking, or she lives in a fortress with her father, who is the lord of that area in Carcassonne. And they end up being seized upon by the French, who want to take over the Christians. This is part of I think it was part of the Crusades. And obviously they want to survive, and her father is also in possession of one of 3 holy books, and he is sworn to protect that, and because of the position he's in and the fact that he is probably not going to survive this, he passes that on to his daughter and entrusts her to get that book out of Carcassonne and back to the order that he is part of. So this just follows Alice trying to get out of Carcassonne, and Alice, who is she's helping her friend who is an archaeologist, and she comes across 2 skeletons in a grave, and she learns more about these skeletons and learns more about what happened to Alice, and it's so twisted and so, I mean, this book is a chunker. It is how many pages? 700 pages long, so the amount of story in this, it feels like a series. So honestly, I would recommend any of her books. So there's also Sepulchre, which splits between 2 times, The Cave, which she did as a short for a charity, and then The Winter Ghost, which is an expanded version of The Cave, which is the actual book, and then Citadel, which goes between World War II and present, and then The Burning Chambers, which I can't quite remember what it's about. I was in a slump when I read it, so I'm going to reread it, but I love her writing. It's incredible. She completely draws you through the south of France, which used to be the Languedoc or Occitan. I can't say enough about this book. And that book is also one of the reasons why Alice from Twilight was my favourite before she was my favourite, because of the character she was. I love the name Alice. I still love the name Alice. I'm obsessed. I still want to get a Labyrinth tattoo, but a very specific Labyrinth tattoo from the book, so we'll see. The next book, if you've been on BookTube for any amount of time, will not be a surprise, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. I listened to this book on audiobook, and I listened to the last section while I was at work sweeping and mopping the floors because the cleaner was sick. I was the manager of the restaurant, and I, at 10 AM in the morning, was sweeping and mopping whilst crying my heart out. There were tears just streaming silently down my face as I read this book. I love this. It is the first, I think, male LGBT book I read, and I never thought I would like that sort of thing. Just I don't know, I wasn't sure why, but it didn't seem like it called out to me, but I do love Greek mythology, so picking this up, didn't really think I'd be interested in the story of Achilles or anything like that, but oh my god, I ended up loving this. My heart breaks for Patroclus. I can't even describe this book. It basically follows Patroclus, who has been banished from his home. He is the prince of that place, and his father's like, you know what, I'm fed up with you, and sends him away. And he's exiled to the court of Achilles' father. He ends up becoming friends with Achilles. And this then follows their relationship as Achilles becomes Achilles, that we know from Greek mythology. So as he goes through onto Troy and the Battle of Troy at the end, including the discussion on Achilles' parents, I can't do this justice. It's incredible. It's beautiful. I cried. Sorry if this ends up wobbly. Hamish is right by the tripod again, and I'm pretty sure he's gonna try and knock it over best he can. The next book on this list is The Nightingale by Kristen Hanna. I special ordered the American cover because look at it, it's gorgeous. This is a World War II historical fiction, but this is in occupied France, Nazi occupied France, and it follows two sisters who get through the war in two very different ways. One joins the resistance and the other ends up having to house a Nazi soldier of some kind, and has a kind of relationship with him where she will speak to him, discuss art with him, have coffee and things with him, and she kind of understands that he is just a person but is struggling to reconcile that with what he's doing in her beloved France. And I really don't want to say any more than that. It is absolutely harrowing, it is amazing. Kristen Hanna does not back away from the horrors that happened during World War II. She does not back away from ripping out your heart, showing you it, and then letting you watch her slam it against the wall. I've never stopped thinking about this book since I read it. And please read it. If you like anything to do with World War II historical fiction, please read it. But do beware that, like I say, she pulls no punches. It's beautiful, but also will leave a mark on your soul forever. The next book is a book that I've probably gone on about a number of times, and you'll be sick of hearing about it at some point if you watch my channel, and that is A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I love all three of these books. I read this all as a trilogy all at once. Like when you're watching the Lord of the Rings movies, you can't just watch Fellowship, you need to watch all three back to back, extended edition, with only some snack breaks. So this is about Diana, who is a witch, but she doesn't want to be a witch. She's not interested in developing her powers. She is also a historian, and she is a professor at prestigious colleges in America, and she's working at a different one at the moment doing a study on historical texts, and she comes across this book that seems to be a palimpsest or palimpsest. I don't know how to say the word, I've only ever seen it written down, but basically it is a book within a book. So what she doesn't realise is this is a magical book that people have been looking for centuries, and she's the one that has unlocked its power. Now when she sends it back into the stacks, it disappears and nobody can call it up again. So she starts being followed around by these demons and other witches and vampires, because in this world there are demons, vampires and witches and humans, who are all 4 different species, and the species don't really mix, they're not meant to mix, and humans are not meant to know they exist. Diana then comes under the protection of a vampire who's also a professor and historian and a molecular biologist and a geneticist, and you know, he studied a lot, called Matthew. And Diana and Matthew are not meant to even speak to each other, never mind anything else, but we know with all our protagonists like this, they like to break the rules. So they end up not just being friends but falling for each other, and this is highly illegal in this world. And they kind of try and figure out, the whole way through this they're trying to figure out this book and what it is and the power it holds, and if it is their book of origin, so how witches, demons and vampires came about. Each section wants it for themselves, and Diana is not willing to give up to any of them, and Matthew is willing to put himself in front of her to, you know, have her back, basically. I love this. I love the relationship. I love the way this was written. Deborah Harkness is a historian, which just makes this even better because it is very historically accurate when it comes to certain things. The research is very accurate because it is research that she does herself. I just absolutely love this. I was so happy when it got made into a TV series, and I cried when I finally got to watch the second series. I am so looking forward to the next one. I don't know if they're going to do 2 series for the second book or if they're just going to jump straight into the third book, but I love this series. The next book I'm going to show you kind of diverts off what you might assume based on what I've already shown you, and that is The Martian by Andy Weir. This is probably one of my favourite books ever. I mean, not all of these are, but I purposefully read this book on the first day of the year every single year since I read it. It is fantastic. It is about an astronaut called Mark Watney who is accidentally left on Mars when his crew have to bail and they think he's dead. Turns out he wasn't dead, and he figures that, okay, I could possibly survive this and somehow get a message out and maybe get back to Earth. So he decides not to give in to his despair and to work it out. He is a botanist, he is sarcastic, and he is just hilarious. So he decides, using his wonderful botany powers, to grow potatoes on Mars. And, you know, he's such a funny guy, he's so hilarious. In this book, I love the movie, but I don't think it quite gives Mark Watney justice. Is that better? Sorry, I just had to go and move something off a chair so that Hamish could sit on it. There he goes. Okay, sorry, so Mark Watney, he is, you know, he's funny, he's sarcastic. The movie, I don't think quite does him justice, but at one point on Earth they discover that he is still alive, and obviously the reaction to that is, oh crap, because they've left someone on Mars. And his crew don't know. It is a months-long journey to get back to Earth, and they decide not to tell his crew, but they find a way to contact him and they decide to try and save him. And when his crew find out that he's still alive, they're obviously racked with guilt, but they also decide, we're going to try and save him. So I absolutely love this. Mark Watney makes this. It is incredible. And what I love again about this book is that Andy Weir took the time to speak to astronauts, to speak to NASA, to speak to physicists, astrophysicists. He put the research in. He did so much research into this book that it is fairly spot on with a lot of things. Obviously it takes liberties because we don't have people going to Mars, you know, but the technology that is currently being developed and the technology that Mark Watney uses are pretty much the same, and he has taken the idea from the experts and made it into his book. You're right there, Hamish. Yes. But yeah, so I'm going to be rereading this soon for part of the Whatever-thon as a comfort read and one of the host favourites, because it is absolutely my go-to book. If I was in a horrible place and wanted something to make me feel better, this is the book I would pick up. It is nothing but I can't even describe it. It's so much fun. It leaves you, you know, you hope that he survives, you're terrified when things go wrong, and the relief you feel at the end of the book. And just please read it if you haven't read it, or at least watch the movie because it's a really good adaptation. The next book is, again, probably not going to be a surprise if you can see behind me, and that is Vampire Academy. I read Vampire Academy and completely fell in love with it. I then binged the entire series, and I will do that again and again and again, is binge this entire series. Vampire Academy follows our two main characters, Rose and Alyssa. They are best friends, and they are also part of a high school, St. Vladimir's Academy, that Rose calls Vampire Academy, as they are part of a mystical race of vampires and others. So there are 3 different types of vampires. There are Dhampirs, which is what Rose are. They are half human, half vampire, or half Dhampir, half vampire. And there are the regular vampires, which are Moroi, and they are just people who happen to need blood. They tend to be, you know, tall, slender, pale, and within this there are, I think, 11 royal families, and Lissa is a member of one of those royal families, the last member of one of those royal families in fact, and Rose is training to be her Dhampir, her protector, the person that keeps her safe, and Rose has taken that seriously from the time they were children. Now there are also Strigoi, and these are what you call your classical vampires. They can't go out in the sun, they can be killed by a stake to the heart, but they are strong, they are fierce, they are evil. And this follows them at Vampire Academy, at St. Vladimir's. Rose just wants to be free. So does Lissa. Lissa is being scared and paranoid, and they run away, and then they're brought back by Dimitri. Dimitri, who is one of my favourite characters of all time. He is his and Rose's relationship, while problematic and morally wrong and really not good in this sort of world. In this world is just great. I love how they are together. In this, I think the girls are 17 and Dimitri is 23, I believe, and he is Rose's instructor when she comes back, because she's missed so much, so she gets one-to-one instruction because they know that she's going to be a great Dhampir. She ends up falling for him, he ends up falling for her, and their relationship through this is what gives me life. But yeah, obviously the teacher-pupil, older guy, minor relationship is not great, doesn't quite cover it. While I can see that the relationship is not okay, I still love their relationship because they really, really do love each other. And I love stories where 2 people are meant to be together. That's my thing. Regardless of what happens, that's my thing. Twilight kind of puts that in a bit of a weird situation because the whole Renesmee thing, I'm not getting into that. But yeah, so there's nothing much else I can say about this series. It's a YA, it's a romance, it's, you know, 2 teenagers having a blast basically, and Rose's attitude is just, she is the sassiest person ever. She's sassy, sarcastic, and has the kick-ass to actually back it up. Next up is probably my newest favourite book, and it is one that I will shout from the rooftops for everybody to read, and that is Long Way Down by Jason Reynolds, illustrated by Chris Priestley. This is about our main character whose brother has been shot and killed, and he knows in his area there are 3 rules. You don't snitch, you don't cry, and you get revenge. So this is about him getting revenge for his brother's death. So he takes his brother's gun, gets into the elevator to go and seek revenge on the guy that shot his brother. And as he goes down in this elevator, on each floor, somebody who has been part of his life that has been affected by gun violence, or killed by gun violence rather, steps into this elevator, and on the way down you sort of get this idea of, you know, the way gun violence works in this area, and it just keeps going round and round and round, and why that needs to stop. There is nothing I can say that can give this book enough praise. It's in verse and it tells so much of a story. I read this in an hour and immediately reread it because it tells the story so well. It tells it beautifully and it really stays with you. Just from the back, Angie Thomas called it beautiful. Reynolds is a literary genius. The Guardian said intensely powerful. Press Association said magnificent, heartbreaking, raw, haunting, shocking. The book list says the verses echo like shots. And yeah, you know, a masterpiece. Astonishing, stunning, magnificent. There is no way to describe this that will do it justice. Please, anybody, everybody, please pick this up. It's there's nothing else I can say. It's probably one of the best books I've ever read in my life. And next is another booktube favourite, which is also one of my favourite books, and that is The Sun Is Also a Star by Nicola Yoon. This has been touted all over booktube for good reason. It is incredible. It takes place over 24 hours with our characters Natasha and Daniel. Natasha is due to be deported with her family, who are from Jamaica. She has only ever known the city that she lives in, I think it's New York. Yeah, she's only ever known New York, and she's about to be deported to a country that she doesn't even remember. And she is on a last-ditch effort to try and save her family and get them visas extended. And yeah, so that's her whole plan for the day. She doesn't want to fall in love, she doesn't believe in romance, and then she bumps into Daniel. Daniel is on his way for an interview to try and get into a very prestigious college, and he believes that the universe will give him love and happiness, and he's a romantic. And he ends up bumping into Natasha and wants to prove to her that, you know, love is real, that magic can happen, and they spend this 24 hours together, and it's just amazing. It is very insta-lovey, but like everybody else, it works so well. It's just so beautiful. It is, to me, the best thing that Nicola Yoon has ever written. I loved everything, but when I got to the end of the book I was like, are you kidding me? I wanted to like Silver Linings Playbook, throw that book out the window when I got to the end of it, because I was like, seriously, you just ruined the whole book for me. But this, perfect all the way through. I love it. The next book I think is a bit controversial, and I'll go into a discussion as to why, and that is Me Before You by Jojo Moyes. So this is about Lou, who gets a job as a companion almost for Will, and Will had a motorcycle accident. Although not the kind of motorcycle accident you would think. He was a daredevil and was taken out by a motorcycle, but again, not in the way you'd think. And he is now, I think he's paraplegic, or is he quadriplegic? I think he's paraplegic, and he's stuck in a wheelchair. He's unable to do anything. He's lost his girlfriend, his friends, his will to live, and his parents want to stop him from going to Switzerland to have assisted suicide performed. So they hire Lou to try and show him that life is good and cheer him up and stop him from doing this. Their relationship grows in a fantastic way, because at first Will is just awful, and he is shown in a light that's like, oh, he's having a pity party, you know, and to Will, being disabled is the worst thing that could happen, and he would rather be dead, and that's what he plans to do. And through this, Lou tries to teach him that there's more to life and you can still have a life when you're disabled. And that, I think, is why it's so controversial. A lot of the rhetoric around disabled people is that, why would you want to live with a disability? And I, as a disabled person and as a newly disabled person, or more recently disabled person, for the longest time had that feeling of dread, the idea that I would be disabled. And I think a lot of people do. Until you're disabled, you don't understand in the same way that disabled people do. I'm not a wheelchair user, I'm not there yet. I will probably end up as a wheelchair user at some point. I already have crutches that I use, and you know, I went through that process of feeling really depressed about my diagnosis and throwing myself a pity party, basically. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. It is genetic. It is something that I have had in my genetics for my entire life, but it was triggered by a virus and it made me incredibly ill. I now have to live with chronic pain, chronic fatigue, insomnia, dislocating and subluxating joints, migraines, cluster headaches. I counted it the other day and I have 34 separate symptoms, 20 of which affect my day-to-day life. And on paper that sounds like a complete nightmare. That sounds awful, and why would anybody want to live like that? And I have days when I'm in so much pain that I just don't think I can deal with it anymore. But then I, you know, have some painkillers, wake up the next day and I feel fine. And I realised it was just a dip, but at the same time, I completely understand that not everybody feels that way. Not everybody is able to deal with being disabled. Not everybody is disabled in the same way. And for Will, there are a lot of other factors involved. And to diminish his autonomy as someone who wants to, in his right mind, go through with assisted suicide, then it is not for me to say he shouldn't do that, because disabled is not a dirty word. Disabled is not a bad word. It is his choice, and as long as you understand that, you know, disability is not a monolith, we're not all the same, then I think as long as you go into this book understanding that, it's much better. I don't think this author was trying to say that living life is not worth living if you're disabled. So I really enjoyed it because the emotions that it made me feel, I truly felt the emotions that Lou felt of losing someone that I cared for very, very deeply, and to have that come across in a book I think was very, very well done. To me, this is not Will's story, this is Lou's story, and unfortunately, yeah, some people will see this as an excuse to say that disabled people don't deserve to live or they shouldn't want to live, but to me, I love that she gave the character autonomy to make his own decisions and never quite fully explains his decision, but by the end you understand that it is his decision and it is not for you to judge. And for that, I love this book. It makes me feel so deeply each time, and if you're going to read this book, don't read any of the others. This is a standalone book as far as I'm concerned. The next book after this, which I think is After You, I've never wanted to damage a book so badly. I hate myself for reading it, but so glad that, thank you EDS, I have a terrible memory and so have forgotten what happens in that book, so it doesn't ruin this for me anymore. I don't even look at the last book, which I think is still me, or just me, or something like that. But if you're going to read this as a standalone, and appreciate that this is about Lou coming to terms with the autonomy of a disabled person, not that this book is saying that disabled people should not live. That was a bit heavy, I'm really sorry. But the next book, again, we're going to slide into disability and things like that, and that is The Hunger Games. And I love this book so much. I love this series so much because of how it deals with our characters. I'll tell you what it's about first, if you've not, you know, heard of it. If you've been living under a rock, I'll go over this for you. So this is a world, a dystopian world in the future in America, where the country is being split into 13 districts and the capital. Now the capital is where the rich people live. The districts try to revolt and they slammed them down and destroyed them, and the districts are basically in punishment for what happened hundreds of years ago. As I said, there are 13 districts, but in this book there are only 12 surviving districts. District 13 was completely wiped off the map by the capital during this war, and that is the warning that they have to not mess with the capital. Now, all of these 12 districts every year have to put basically all of their kids' names from the age of, I think it's 10 to 18, into these raffles, and one boy and one girl are picked for the Hunger Games, and that is, again, if you've been living under a rock, it's the only chance you'll not know what this is. It's based off of a battle royale. They go in and they have to kill each other, and the survivor at the end gets lauded around the capital and the district as the champion, and they get a nice house, and that is the warning and the punishment for the districts so that they don't, you know, rise up against the capital. Now, this book follows Katniss, who has volunteered to take the place of her little sister, whose name has only been put into the raffle once. It's the first time and she's picked out, so Katniss decides that she will take her place. She's also put into the ring with a boy that she knows called Peeta, and it's basically them trying to survive in the Hunger Games, and at the end of it, Katniss does not come out whole. And by that I mean, yes, she goes deaf because there's an explosion next to her ear, but what I mean by that is it's seriously affects her mental health. She starts having nightmares to the day, you know, in the future where the last book ends, and then it's like a, you know, so many years later afterwards, she still has nightmares, she still has PTSD. The way they work the PTSD into this is phenomenal. You know, the things she's seen, and even though she is meant to be, you know, a strong, kick-ass character, she hunts for food for her family, she takes risks, she's a warrior, she's the Mockingjay, and yet this strong person is haunted by seeing the eyes of the other tributes in the mutts. She is haunted by the smell of roses and blood. She doesn't handle things very well. She's not very mentally strong. And that's one of the things she hates about her mother, is that her mother shut down when her father died. And yet, she herself starts to understand why when she goes through her own PTSD. And it's just, I love the way that Suzanne Collins deals with that, because, you know, just because you're a strong person doesn't mean that you can't have any sort of issues. Mental health is a massive thing that I think we should be talking more about, and I view it through that lens when I read The Hunger Games, because these are children. These are children that are being put into an arena to fight to the death, and everyone has to watch. They have to watch their children fight to the death. They have to watch children that they know from their areas fight to the death. They have to root for someone to come out alive at the expense of 23 other people. And the people in the capital enjoy it. They see it as festivities, they see it as entertainment, and they want brutal bloodlust. I love this book. I picked these up and read them in 24 hours, and I think I slept. Like, I'd just come out of surgery, no joke. I had surgery the day before, got out of hospital, and could not sleep because of whatever they'd given me, and stayed up reading these books. Got all the way through this, I think halfway through the second book, fell asleep for 4 hours, woke up again, finished them off, and then watched the films. The next two books are by the same author, and again, you probably won't be surprised to see these on here, or maybe you won't be a bit surprised to see these on here. The first one, which is nobody's surprise, is the Clockwork Angel trilogy, so that is the Infernal Devices trilogy. I love this. I love all the characters, I love the historical setting, the magic, I love Jem with all my heart, I love Will with all my heart. This love triangle is by far the best love triangle ever. I've said it, I mean it, I'll never change my mind about it, because these people truly love each other in so many different ways, and it's just beautiful. This is a Shadowhunter novel, and it follows, I think, what year is it in? I'm not quite sure. Victorian England. It's in Victorian England, and Tessa Gray, who is finds that she's a warlock, which is also a Shadowhunter. She ends up, I can't even describe it really very well, but yeah, it's a typical Shadowhunter book. I'll read the back. When 16-year-old Tessa Gray arrives in England during the reign of Queen Victoria, something terrifying is waiting for her in London's downworld, where vampires, warlocks and other supernatural folk stalk the gaslit streets. Friendless and hunted, Tessa seeks refuge with the Shadowhunters, a band of warriors dedicated to ridding the world of demons. Drawn ever deeper into their world, she finds herself fascinated and torn between two best friends, and quickly realises that love may be the most dangerous magic of all. I think that trivialises this book. I think this book is fantastic. You will fall in love with the characters, and with the Shadowhunter books, it's done in a way where you can read them in any order, really, but I would still, if it was me, prefer to read the Mortal Instruments series first, because there are characters in this that you see in there, and then it goes back to show their origin, and that's just the way I like to read it. But yeah, I would recommend this to anybody. It's so good, and the characters, it's not even just the three main characters. I love Charlotte and Henry, and just everybody's relationship in this, the friendships. It's, you know, you recognise other characters in this, and it's beautiful. I think if you understand Will in this, it ruins a lot of the Mortal Instruments books. So I would always read the Mortal Instruments first, but that's just me. I'm a stickler for certain orders of things. And the next one is still Cassandra Clare, and that is The Red Scrolls of Magic. My favourite character in all of the Cassandra Clare Shadowhunters books is Magnus. Magnus Bane is the best character ever, and the guy that played him in the original remake of Mortal Instruments was fantastic and beautiful and amazing, and I'm so sad that he died because he's the perfect Magnus to me. Harisham Jr. has done a fantastic job, but you know when you get your original in something and they're just always the one you love? I love him as Magnus. And this is about Magnus and Alec. It's a spin-off during the Mortal Instruments books and just follows them and their relationship and how they got their boys, and I love this series and I can't wait for the next one to come out. I just love the world she's created. I love how you see more of the characters, because Alec is a very closed off character in this, and she's gone, do you know what, I'm going to expand this character so he's not as 2D, and I love that about this. I love the places they go, I love the action, I love the relationship that they have, because it is a very two-sided relationship. It's not that one of them is strong and one of them is weak. They protect each other, they love each other, they are a team, and I love them so much. Okay, that is the end of that video. You're probably saying thank God for that, because I'm pretty sure this is going to be a long one. Yeah, so Hamish is now asleep on the chair. Now that I've finished filming, he has decided he's going to be quiet. I am just going to say thank you so much for watching this video. If you like any of these books, please let me know in the comments. If you have any books that based on what I've shown you, you think I would love, please let me know, because yes, always, I am always up for reading more books, even though I have a lot of books on my TBR. It's fine, I'll get through it, it's fine, it's fine. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will hopefully see you in the next one. Bye!